Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. As you can see, we are back here once again with our 1995 Ford Escort Wagon, aka the Sippy Cup. And if you are just joining us now, there's a playlist for this car which I will link right up there for you. And if you are on a device that doesn't support cards, I'll throw it down in the description for you too. Today we are back to repair what is the lesser of the two evils from the last video you saw on this car, which is fix the fuel leak. The last video you saw of this car was when we fixed the AC, and I'll explain why the fuel leak is actually the lesser of those two evils. So what we got going on right here with this thing is the fuel filler neck is leaking. The reason why that's really not such a problem is by the time you figure out your fuel filler neck is leaking, you've just pumped an entire tank of gas into the thing. So it's either going to leak out everything that it's going to leak out, and there's really not much you can do about it, which by the time I saw it, that's pretty much what had already happened. Or you can try like crazy to pump all the gas out of it before that happens, and maybe you'll make it, maybe you won't. In my case, the fuel filler neck problem is actually on the pipe side, so it's the up highest side. And these cars are weird. That pipe actually keeps fuel in it until there's like half a tank of gas in these things. So since it was at the high point, by the time I got it home, it was done leaking. I noticed a puddle and that was it. In the next 2 hours, it was done. But it still had a full tank of gas, and part of that gas was down lower in the tube closer to the tank. So my only real option was pump all the gas out of it, which is kind of a pain in the butt. And I have a video on that already if you want to go check it out. It's how to pump bad gas out of an EFI Ford. Throw it up there, throw it in the description. But I just didn't feel like doing that, especially since I knew I was going to end up driving this thing to my parents' house, which is going to absorb about half to 3/4 of a tank of gas anyway in about a week. So that's what I did. I just waited it out. Getting the air fixed was a big deal because I didn't want to roast my nuts off. Getting the fuel leak that it was already done leaking fixed? Let's get to it now though. It's kind of funny as an artifact of just getting it to it now, is I've had to drive the car a little bit more than I expected to. You know, some other things came up. So I've had like electric car levels of range anxiety with this thing because I've just been trying to keep the tank completely on E so this wouldn't be a big pain in my butt when the time came. And our offender is that guy right there, that rubber hose. So we can kind of give you a shot of the whole thing there. And you can see the filler neck hole in the tank actually goes into the side of the tank on this car. So that's what I was talking about before. Where it was leaking, you can actually see it right there where it's got that little kind of clean spot down at the bottom of the hose, or the dark spot or whatever. That's where it was leaking out. And you can see that hose is all cracked out and everything. And I mentioned in the previous video where we fixed the air, which was actually an ignition switch problem, that I had just done that job 6 months before. Well, this particular job right here I just did 3 years ago. So twice in the same day this car broke, and both times were jobs that I've already done in the past, and that kind of pisses me off. What also pisses me off is that hose clamp that you see nearest in your view is like a $6 constant tension special blah 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 hose clamp I put on there. And the first thing I did when I noticed the thing was leaking is I tried to tighten it down some more, and I stripped it out. So I'm out an expensive hose clamp, and I'm only now noticing that hose clamp is also supposed to be stainless, and you can see the head of it's nice and rusty, so not quite what I bargained for. Another minor annoyance here is I had this fuel filler neck off the car entirely, which we're going to be doing again here shortly, I think. And when I had it off, I cleaned it up as well as I could and undercoated it. You can see my undercoating job didn't hold up any too well. That could be because the fender liner is still presently out of the car, because it's a lot easier to do this with the fender liner out, and I just left it out because I need to do some other suspension work and stuff back here, and that may have helped contribute to this problem. Like I said, this is a job I have already done 3 years ago, but that is also another failed Motorcraft part. That one I'll kind of take some blame for because it had a bad reputation for a long time, but at the same time, this was right when I got the car. I was low on cash. I think the Motorcraft one was $9, so I'm like, it'll probably be fine, and it was not fine. So we have a different brand for our replacement. And that different brand is a Spectra Premium. I have bought other Spectra crap before and not been impressed at all, but we already tried OEM Ford and it's junk, so we'll give this one a try. And this guy, even through the bag, I don't know how well you see on camera, but it has like this texture in it. It just looks much more like it's actually intended for fuel. And the annoying part is this is almost a straight hose, but not quite. So you can't just put a section of straight fuel hose in it, it just won't connect. Ironically, I told you guys that I'd done some, restoration work on that filler neck. Well, I'd actually bought a filler neck for this car from these guys, and it didn't fit worth a damn. To the point that I totally destroyed it, wasted $80, smashing it with a hammer, everything else, trying to make it fit. Just wasn't going to happen. Just a piece of junk. I threw that one in the scrap pile. Since I destroyed it, I actually bought another one, thinking maybe the one I had was defective, and it was also garbage. So it went back and I got my money back. So I've had hit or miss experiences with this brand. That's why I didn't run to this hose the first time. And plus this hose was, I think, 20 bucks or so. And like I said, the Motorcraft one at the time I bought it was like $8 and money was tight. But anyway, we're gonna throw this guy in and hope for the best. Frankly, this car may not have another 3 years in it. Who knows? And the first step of doing that would normally be to probably drop your fender liner and stuff out, but this one's already out. Frankly, I don't remember how it goes in. I think some of it is bolted to the filler neck. If I remembered, I'd tell you, but I don't. And then there are 2 screws in here. The fun part is I lost both those screws through the process of doing this. This car was actually taken apart at that time at my dad's house, and I was going back and forth doing other stuff and blah, blah, blah. So I grabbed a screw that sort of fits and it holds the neck in, and I'm hoping I didn't strip the neck out. I'll need to be taking that screw out, take the 2 clamps off the tank, hopefully get the filler neck to cooperate with me, and hopefully not a real big deal to change them out. So I've removed the questionable screw on the filler neck, and it's loose from the car now. Now we need to take the 2 worm gear clamps off. There's one right there and the one I showed you at the fuel tank. And we're going to take that compression guy off and hope we can get that ancient hose back off of there. I did not replace the vent tube when I did this before because it wasn't leaking. And it's up high enough, I don't think they do tend to leak. And to do that, I am going to use my clamp pliers. Those are one of the very few, I would say, professional grade tools I truly own. These are Matco, and I had a Lyle version of these, like a generic version, and they broke the first time I tried to use them. I literally took them out of the box to show them to my dad. I'm like, hey, look how cool these are, and they blew apart. So I bought these. But the idea is, if you haven't seen these before, you put that end over your clamp, and you squeeze the handles, and this keeps the clamp clamped. I'm actually not a huge fan of this set because the end of them doesn't go big enough for a lot of stuff. It looks like there's a snap-on set that does, and I would maybe consider upgrading to those, but I think those are like 200 bucks. So anyway, for today, this is what we got. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take those clamps off and see if we can get our filler neck jiggered out of the way so we can slip our new hose on. Well, I got both those clamps off, but I missed one. That guy right there that's way out of focus is an M10 that holds the filler neck to the body. That guy's one of the screws that holds the inner wheel well in, the fender liner, and I'm shocked it hasn't fallen out because I wasn't planning to drive it for 3 years with it like this, but here's hoping I anti-seized that 10. We'll see if we can get it out of there. I'm not sure if I anti-seized it before or not, but it came right off. Now I've taken the gas cap off, and I'm just going to try and jigger this little bracket away from the hole just to give us a little more room to be free. Pretty sure I can. Yeah, there it goes. Just have to jigger it the right way. There it goes. So now we've got a little bit more freedom to wiggle, try and get that thing on off there. Well, I did end up taking the vent tube off because there was just no other way. Like right there is where the vent tube was. And then to get it off the tank, you just pull like hell and it'll come off. You see how bad a shape this replacement hose is. Again, it's only 3 years old. And now the fun part's going to be prying it off this filler neck and getting the new one put back on. The new one shouldn't be a very big deal. Normally, I just like to put some grease inside these hoses and slip them on. I may try some silicone instead because, I greased this one before I put it on. It was just a nightmare to take off. And way back in there where it goes, it's a plastic fuel tank. It's not rusty or anything. It was just a monster pain. Fun quick story. This was also broken when I bought the car, and the jerk I bought it from had to have known it was because it was broken at the other end, and it would only hold like half a tank of fuel. So the first thing you do when you buy a new car, or at least I do when you buy a new used car, is go fill it up. And I had to drive this thing like 300 miles home, and I filled it up and immediately starts leaking gas, smelling like gas, everything else. Lots of fun. That guy was a real class act. Anyway, I'm going to pry that bad boy off of there, and we'll see about getting our new one put on. Actually, at this point, it was easier to just take the whole neck out of the car. It just kind of falls out once it's not connected anymore to the gas tank. We can just grabble on that and get it yanked off. But yeah, let's look at what garbage this is. Here's a fun one for you. I left behind residue. I don't know if you'll be able to hear that or not, but that residue is actually sticky. So that hose was actually breaking down from literally fuel and from, probably the grease I put on it. Obviously, that's not something that's supposed to happen. I will take some alcohol or something and get that guy cleaned up, and we will lube up our new guy and get him on there. And just for kicks, this is our old versus new comparison. You guys see what I was saying about the new hose before, how it's kind of got ridges and stuff in it and actually looks like a hose, meant to do something. That other guy's just smooth. They look like they're probably the same hose. The new one maybe just a little longer. I don't think that'll hurt us. There's a side-by-side. Yeah, if I have to cut it down or something, that's fine, but I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think she'll be okay. So I've got my new hose shoved on it probably way too far on this end. That's okay. I've got both ends sprayed with silicone grease, and it turns pretty nicely. And I've got a pretty good guess at how I want my hose clamps oriented. So now it's just a matter of getting under the car and stuffing it back in. It's not too terribly realistic to actually film that. And when I get to this vent line, I'm just going to put some regular old axle grease on that to lube it up and hopefully keep that from corroding any further. Well, that was a 2.5 hour nightmare, but it's done now. Let's cover a couple mistakes I made before we dive under the car, and I'll show you the recipe I cracked here. First mistake, this stuff didn't work worth anything. This stuff worked really good. So yeah, just axle grease the bejesus up out of your tube ends and much better. This stuff was not even as good as spitting on it, so worth a shot, but didn't work out for me. Other mistake, don't put any hose clamps on the thing whatsoever before you get it under the car. Having flashbacks from 3 years ago of reliving that experience now, and I think I learned that then and have subsequently forgot, of course. And then the next thing I learned, at least with this Spectre hose, is due to its length or construction or whatever, the Ford one, when I put it on just like you guys saw earlier, where I put it on the filler neck and then put the whole thing in the car that way. No, not the way to do it here. Grease up both ends of the hose, grease up the gas tank nipple connection, and then ram jam the angle part onto the gas tank. Do that before you do anything else. Then grease up the filler neck, snake it up the side of the quarter panel again, and then you can wiggle it together. Took about 5 minutes once I figured out that I'd screwed up the process. That wasn't such a big deal. So then once you get both ends done, your next move is to come in back in the inner wheel well and get that M8 put back in there. Then of course your fuel filler neck hardware up in the fill hole, whatever hardware you have, hopefully not the garbage that I did to my car. Then you're going to want to have your hose clamps all the way opened up, and you can put them together, I found much more easily, up toward the fuel tank end to slip them over, and then slide them back this way to actually put them together and tighten them. Pay careful orientation to what I've got there, because it's pretty much the only way you get tools on them. So you want the top guy shooting out that way. Get the one on the fuel tank so it's pointing straight down at you, and you should have okay tool access to do it. So there you go. There's the finished deal. We got our vent tube back on and everything. Once again, the recipe here is to just bring the rubber hose down here and ram jam it on the gas tank itself. Then install your neck. Get the neck shoved in this end of the hose and grease the bejesus out of all this before you do. Then actually bolt the filler neck to the car so this still has some freedom of movement if it needs to. Then you come back and put your clamps on. Then you're done. So the next thing we're going to need to do is run up to the Fuel King, and I'll see if I can just toss a GoPro under the car or something when I put gas in it and see if it leaks. And if it does, I'm going to sell the bastard. Speaking of, don't feel bad that the camera wasn't running for this whole thing here. I try to keep the channel pretty family friendly, and there was a whole lot of family unfriendly things said while I re-cracked the code of how to do this. Again, 3 years is a long time, and I know for a fact I had to put this one together a different way than I did the old one. So anyway, on to the gas station. Well, the car's been sitting here overnight. It looks like our trip to the Fuel King was pretty successful. I don't smell any gas, I haven't seen a drop of gas, anything else, so all good. But before we conclude things, I thought I'd give you guys a better shot of this old one. Really doesn't look too bad, right? Till you start to get into some details. If you wheel it around one direction here and give it a squeeze, it's just all split out. What a piece of junk. 3 years old. Incredible. But with that, we're going to conclude this one, put another one in the W column, and hopefully we don't have to ever worry about that again. So as always, guys, I want to thank you for stopping by, and we'll catch you on the next one. I'm Max, that's Saddington Bear, and we make videos like this all the time. Here are a couple links to some other videos we've made, and we really appreciate you guys stopping in.